everyone. I want to first thank you for being such an active member of Corpus Christi University Parish, and in a special way for your commitment to liturgical ministry here at Corpus Christi. We're filming these for some trainings we're doing in the different liturgical ministries: ushers, mass coordinators, extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion servers, and lectors, and just a kind of refreshment course in a certain sense. I've been here a number of years, and just sort of some things I've observed, but also kind of refreshing, and a few minor changes in each of the ministries. And so, again, first of all, thank you for your commitment to serve in these liturgical ministries. They assist us in the worship of God, and that's, of course, the point of joining the liturgical ministries. So before we get to any of the sort of things I want to emphasize in liturgical ministry or any proposed kind of minor changes, I want to stress sort of three foundational principles of liturgy and how I kind of approach our worship here at Corpus Christi. The first is that as the Second Vatican Council taught, the Mass and the liturgy are the source and summit of the Christian life. That what we encounter here every Sunday, every Saturday night and every Sunday is of the utmost importance to our faith, to the building up of our faith. It's the central mystery of the Christian life that we enter into Jesus' death and resurrection. And so all of the care that we take to making sure that the liturgy is done well, that ministers know what they're doing, that is all built around the idea that we are protecting and upholding the dignity of something that is so central to us as Christians, that we enter in to the sacrifice of Jesus and rise with him so that we can go out into the world and to be his missionaries of grace and love. And so sometimes it can seem like maybe we surround the liturgy with too many regulations and prescriptions and so on. But the truth is we protect with norms those things which we find particularly worthy of dignity. And so that is one of the reasons that we're so attentive here and at other parishes to the liturgy. The second foundational principle I'd like to suggest is that we don't create the liturgy creates us. It's something that we sort of recognize that we are inheritors of a Christian tradition of worship that is virtually 2,000 years old. Christian worship has looked very similar from the very beginning. It was basically an adaptation of two things within the Jewish tradition, which was the first part, the synagogue service, which is sort of absorbed into the liturgy of the word, and then the second, which is the Passover meal, which becomes the sort of ancient origin of the liturgy of the Eucharist. And so the earliest origins we have of Christian worship has this twofold structure of the liturgy of the word, of hearing of God's love story towards us, and then transitioning into taking part in and receiving the one Passover lamb who is Jesus. And so that central structure has been really present in Christian liturgy from the very beginning. We inherit that structure. And so in a certain sense, we have to be careful within the liturgy that we're not creating it as we want it to be, that we inherit a tradition, that the liturgy transforms us as we embark on that ancient structure of Christian worship, that twofold movement of the liturgy of the Word and of the liturgy of the Eucharist. The third thing I would say as a kind of foundation for liturgical ministry is that our role as liturgical ministers is one of prayer, not of performance. So one of the things, even as a priest, I have to be mindful of is that Christ has to be at the center stage of liturgy, not me as the priest, right? And sometimes that can be sort of easy to conflate because of the priest's central role in the liturgy. But it's true of all liturgical ministers that we are there to assist in the worship. We're not there to take sort of center stage, that we are to aid the prayer not to distract people from encountering Christ in the liturgy. One thing that sort of follows from this, which is that if we ever find ourselves, due to health or other factors, incapable of performing the ministry that we have sort of signed up for and done for many years, if we find that we're in some ways being distracting, or we can't perform that ministry to the level that it demands, it's an incredible act of humility to be able to step down, to realize that we aren't at the center of liturgy, but Christ is meant to be at the center of liturgy. And so, friends, those are just a couple things on my mind as we do some liturgical training here, which is that this is so important. The reason we put so much energy here at Corpus Christi and other parish into this is because it is the central mystery of the Christian faith, that we don't create it, it creates us, it transforms us as we enter into it, and that we're meant to be participants in the drama of liturgy, not the main actor, right? That's Christ, but to be participants of this incredible drama. So again, I want to thank you all for your commitment to this parish, and in a special way for your commitment to liturgical ministry. It makes the liturgy here, as I've said to a million people and as people brag about all over the city, I think arguably the best liturgy in town. It's an incredible experience here, and we want to continue to build on that legacy and continue that tradition. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all of our extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion for responding to the call to be a part of such an important ministry in our church, which is to distribute the body and blood of Jesus to those who are gathered. It's an incredible task, and I thank you for taking it seriously and for committing to this ministry. There's just a few things that I want to emphasize for our extraordinary ministers, as well as a couple changes that we'll be embarking upon this fall. Just a few reminders. I think these are all part of our current sort of understanding, but just a kind of refreshment. Just a reminder that if the deacon is not present, the first person that I distribute to be to my left when I turn around, that first person will receive from me both the body and the blood. I will give them the cup, and they will follow me to the rest of the Eucharistic ministers to distribute the precious blood. When they're done, or when we kind of meet, when I'm giving cups to people, and we sort of meet in the middle, you can just take the chalice back to the altar and set it there in the center. So just a reminder, if the deacon's not there, that first person will help me distribute to the rest of the ministers. It's a little simple thing, but some of you have noticed there's just a certain way that I carry the two cups at one time when I'm handing them out, and for some reason that's how I always do it. And so I just ask you not to grab the purificators out of my hand. I will hand you both the cup, and then I'll put purificators together, and I'll hand one of you each of them. And so it's just a weird thing that I can't do it at the same time. But I would just ask that don't try to take the purificator, because then you could get both of them, or we could drop one. Just take the cup, and then I'll hand you each a purificator. If it would really help me out if groups of two on my right-hand side, as I turn around, could come to the corner of the altar and receive the cups from me. So as you know, if I have to walk to you with two cups, just a long walk with cups with a bunch of wine in it. And so the easier thing would be kind of in groups of two to come toward me as best as you can. It would make it easier for me to distribute, and a little quicker if the deacon is not present. One thing you may have noticed about me is I do switch communion spots occasionally. It's partially for myself, just give it kind of a different feel for communion, and people have voiced that they sometimes enjoy receiving from the priest. And so at the 4:30 and 6, if I do that, I will mark that on the sheet before Mass. So you'll see me in a different spot than my ordinary spot, and then someone else will just sign up for my spot. At the 11 o'clock, I can't do that because there's a particular gentleman who uses a low-gluten host that comes to me, and so I usually give communion to him. But if he's not there, I often will then ask somebody in the line if I can flip with them. I don't do it before Mass just because I do it on the fly if that particular gentleman is not there. So just know that if I come up to you and say who's in spot 2, 3, or 4, that I might be asking you to switch at the 11 a.m., 4:30, and 6. I would do it on the sheet. Just one thing on the distributor who is on the right side of me normally, of the spot I normally have, will distribute one host in a pyx for Luke at the piano. So that's one thing I asked Luke to do. They would often just say one for Luke, and sometimes it was confusing, so I just asked Luke to use a pyx. So now somebody in the choir, it's usually the first or second person, will have a little pyx for a host or a piece of bread that will go to Luke for the choir at the 11 a.m. One thing I've noticed and I've heard from a number of non-Catholic students is that there's quite a diversity of what happens when they come up for a blessing. So we have one female student who's amazingly been coming here for 4 years and is not Catholic and always comes up for a blessing, and said she has gotten probably 100 different things when she comes forward. Some who just kind of ignore her and don't know what to do. And so I just wanted to maybe make a suggestion for some continuity on that, which is, I think what's generally recommended is that you would place your hand on their shoulder and say, "May God bless you." If someone comes forward either with their hands across their chest or their finger in front of their mouth, that you might just place your hand on them, shoulder would be appropriate, or their forehead, and say, may God bless you. That would be, I think, an appropriate thing for us to do for someone who asks for a blessing. I want to mention one kind of significant change that will be impacting you, which is that we're going to change how the purification of the vessels is done after communion. So in the past, the Mass coordinator would purify all of the bowls and the cups after Mass. We're going to move in sort of compliance with the liturgical norm that a priest or a deacon purifies the vessels. And so the change will be that after communion, after everyone's received, instead of the ministers going back to the sacristy, they'll simply go to the credence table, which is the table sort of to the right of the presider's chair and to the left of Luke at the piano. The trays will be set up for you to place your vessels on the trays. You'll have to consume leftover precious blood there at the table, and then you will consolidate all of the leftover bread into one bowl. Once all the precious blood's been consumed and the bread's all been consolidated, you'll come out the same as normal altogether, just to the back and to the sacristy to see if any help is needed in terms of consuming the leftover hosts. One thing I would ask while you're doing that is to maintain kind of a spirit of quiet and respect. A few distributors have voiced to me that they find that time is a little sort of playful and everyone's talking to each other as they're consuming the extra hosts, and they felt a little uncomfortable. And so I would just ask that you maintain a spirit of quiet and reverence during that consumption of extra hosts. If there's not many hosts left over, if the ushers were kind of right on with their count, then you'll be able to go right back to your seats. There won't be any need necessarily to have a ton of help with consuming the extra hosts. So the main difference is, instead of coming back to the sacristy, you'll be placing your vessels on the credence table, where Deacon Justin and I will purify the vessels. You'll come back, see if any help is needed with consuming the extra hosts, and then returning to your seat. One sort of nuance with that is because you would normally come back with the hosts and the precious blood, you would see often the people who couldn't come up for Holy Communion, and you would distribute on the way out. And since you're not going to be walking back that way with the vessels, you'll have to be mindful of that. And before you come over to the credence table, a few people will have to go and make sure that the people that can't come forward for Holy Communion can receive Holy Communion, and then you'll bring your things up to the credence table. So we'll work through the growing pains of that change, but thank you for your understanding and for your flexibility, and I want to thank you again for offering this incredible ministry to Corpus Christi.